Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and in this video I'm going to be going through the most hyped matchups that I want to see and need to see in every single division, both men's division, women's MMA as well, giving you the best matchups and why. But before we get into that, I need to completely explain why I'm in a completely different setup at the moment, and that is because I have completely moved houses. I am in a completely new area. And that required not only moving everything over, but that also required renovating the whole entire place. So it has been an exhausting last couple of months, and especially in the last week to 2 weeks, it's definitely been bad because I moved my setup over and I've had absolutely no internet for 2 weeks. So I still actually have no internet right now at the time that you're watching this video, most likely, if you're watching it just on release. And that's because they've just stuffed up my internet somehow. They've got it on a completely different address. But anyway, as you can see, we've clearly got like a pretty, basic setup here. Kind of just threw it all together just to give you guys obviously a background and everything, so you're not just staring at a blank wall and my ugly face. So with that, I can confidently say that this has been one of the best years for the UFC in terms of their matchups. They have been absolutely cooking this year. I mean, we've had fights like Dustin Poirier versus Islam Makhachev at UFC 302. We got the best middleweight fight that we could have asked for in Israel Adesanya versus Dricus Du Plessis. And of course, UFC 300, we had Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje. Do I really need to say anything about that fight and that whole entire card? It really does emphasize the point that the UFC have been doing a very good job of giving us the matchups that we really do want this year. Now, the matchups that I'm going to make in this video, these are going to be fights that have not already been made. So they could be rematches, but I can't say like Holloway versus Ilia Topuria at Featherweight, for example, because that's a fight that's already been made. So it's a matchup that has already been set. These are matchups that are going to be, they might not make the most complete sense to make at the moment, but just stylistically and in terms of any form of drama factor and beef, these are matchups that are going to pop off regardless. These are the dream matchups that I do want to be seeing, whether it's drama based, whether it's just stylistically, whatever it is. Trust me, with these matchups, if we get them, they will not disappoint. So let's get into it. And kicking it off at Flyweight, I am confidently going with Kai Kara-France versus Manel Kape. These guys, this matchup completely kicked off this video idea for me because the two of them hate each other, absolutely loathe each other, and this kind of drama, this kind of animosity is what the flyweight division has been lacking since it started. There has been nothing even close. You can't say Demetrius Johnson versus Henry Cejudo. That's probably the closest you're ever going to get. There just really isn't any small man syndrome real beef up until this matchup actually came to fruition. Like when it was going to actually be happening at UFC 293 in Sydney, which Manel Kape went in on Kai Kara-France for pulling out due to sustaining a concussion, and then went and degraded the whole entire city kickboxing team that he's a part of. And then after that, he pegged a water bottle at Kai at the press conference.
You have 3 weeks to fight him, you little fucking pussy. Look at you. You have the courage to come here to stage. Yes, stand up, motherfucker. Stand the fuck up. Stand the fuck up, motherfucker. What you want? What you want?
The drama is really what obviously the division needs, and it's great between them because they're both fantastic strikers, but that's also to adding to the point as a bonus. Stylistically, both of these guys are not going to go to the ground against each other. I mean, we're going to be getting a high level kickboxing fight with Kai's speed and power versus Kape's accuracy and his defense. Now, with Kai just taking out Steven Erceg and Kape just losing to Muhammad Makhachev, it's not really likely that this will happen next, but even down the line with the beef they have and the stylistic layout, this is 100% one of the most confident picks for me in terms of the matchup that I want to see most, especially in that flyweight division that needs that kind of animosity. So please give us this matchup very soon. Now moving up to bantamweight, as you can see in the thumbnail, Petr Yan versus Deiveson Figueiredo. I mean, if you don't think that this isn't one of the best matchups to make in all of the divisions combined, I will honestly think that you are crazy. If you want a full, you know, world-class display of MMA within one fight, just make this matchup, because we have got Petr Yan, who is the former bantamweight champion, who in my opinion is one of the most composed fighters in the entire history of the UFC. Not only just now, he is one of the most composed fighters in the whole entire 30 to 31 years that we've had this sport. And honestly, that with that striking that he has, that boxing, those credentials, and his defense, he's without a doubt one of the best boxers in the UFC at the moment, and is back on track now after beating Song Yadong. So he's got that confidence. And then look at Deiveson Figueiredo. I mean, he's the former flyweight champion, but clearly bantamweight has been absolutely no issue for him. He's beaten Rob Font in his debut there. He beat Cody Garbrandt, finished him, and not only beating Cheeto in his last performance, but he's the first one to actually drop the guy as well, and he has a granite chin. Now both of these guys have great takedown entries and transition on the ground very nicely. Yan has the very good takedown defense, so it'd be interesting to see if Figueiredo can get him there. But then if Figueiredo can, Figueiredo has the offensive submission threat. He's 9-1 with submission, so he's very dangerous there. But as fun as the ground game would be, as a bonus, the striking is what we really need to look at here. Figueiredo, he's got the power, clearly, against Marlon Vera, and the aggression on his side, and he lands at a 55% clip with his strike, so he's very accurate when it comes to landing. And then Yan has some of the best strike defense in the entire UFC, in the entire game. He's got very, very nice combinations, and he hits at a very high clip. He lands at over 5 strikes per minute, which is very active. And when you look at Deiveson Figueiredo as well, these guys, I mean, obviously with him being a flyweight, having such high-paced fights, which you're always pretty much going to get at the top of that division, it's just going to translate so well over to here, especially him capitalizing on Yan as a slow starter. So these guys, regardless, no matter if it's 3-round, 5-round, they are going to be putting on a technical masterclass. Bet my kidneys on it. And both of these guys has some of the best fight IQ in the game as well. They have 26 finishes between them, competing against the best of the best in their respective divisions as well when it comes to that statistic. And the best part of looking at this matchup is that it's extremely likely that it actually could happen. You know, Petr Yan has stated to media that he really likes this matchup and he wants it done. And Figgy did say that he did say that he wants the title next, but between O'Malley fighting Merab Dvalishvili and then if O'Malley wins fighting Umar after that, he could be waiting a while, which his age isn't going to agree with him, especially with that amount of time. He could be honestly 37 or 38 by the time that happens. And as good as Figueiredo is, father time comes for everyone. So if we're going to get a masterclass and he's going to be a fan favorite and possibly take out Petr Yan, that is just going to blow your stock through the roof no matter how old you are. So look, whoever wins this should 100% be slotted for the next title shot if they can make this matchup next. Please, for the love of God, do. And Yan gave O'Malley his hardest fight that he's had. And then Figgy just dropped Vera, which O'Malley could not do himself. So there are definitely reasons and evidence to push them to the title. But show me a fan that doesn't want this matchup, you know? Honestly, from world-class striking to very high-level fight IQ, we need this signed. Take my money. And moving up to featherweight, I'm pulling back up the rankings a bit in comparison to the last two, and that's for a pretty good reason, because featherweight is pretty unique in the sense of having fighters like Holloway and Volkanovski, who are two obviously fan favorites, but they've also basically fought and beaten everyone in the division. So I'm going to be going with the immovable object in Dan Ige against the current unstoppable force in Gene Silva. Now, with Dan Ige gaining a lot of fans from his 4-hour notice fight against Diego Lopez, and then Gene Silva simultaneously tearing through two divisions, stopping both Charles Jourdain and Drew Dober, who are two of the most durable fighters in those divisions respectively, absolutely wrecked them. I mean, Drew Dober obviously didn't get knocked out, but but he was an absolute bloody mess. And look, this is a scrap that we just need to see. And I mean, it's extremely feasible that it can happen. Just like Jan and Figgy, this is extremely feasible. This would give Gene Silva the opportunity to get into the rankings because Ige is ranked 14th at the time of this video. And Dan Ige gives himself the chance to bolster his fan base even more by taking out the division's boogeyman who is outside of the rankings. You know, Gene Silva is looking like an unstoppable force at this point. So if Dan Ige can get that done, add that with his 4-hour notice fight against Diego Lopez, straight into the top 10. Without a doubt, into that top 10, no questions asked. The main reason behind making this fight, for me personally, is the mystery of whether the unstoppable force can break through that immovable object, meaning can Gene Silva actually knock Dan Ige out, or the other way around, because both of these guys have never been finished in their entire careers. And aside from, you know, like Josh Emmett, Gene Silva is the guy with the most potential, I do honestly believe, that can make a feasible matchup that can actually possibly take Dan Ige out. But I chose Gene over Emmett because he's just got more of a rewarding factor by winning and does have a stronger wrestling threat, which, you know, can test to see whether he can submit Ige as well. And there's just more business stock in Gene Silva over Emmett because Gene Silva is so much younger than Emmett. Emmett's coming to the latter end, the twilight area of his career. So this is definitely just a more rewarding business and overall just MMA based fight that you can make over Josh Emmett versus Dan Ige, in my opinion. So we definitely need this one done. Now moving on to lightweight. So lightweight is always pretty tricky when it comes to matchups because we are pretty much always spoiled for choice when it comes to 155 pounds. We could have Islam versus Arman, which, you know, technically isn't confirmed, which we will eventually get. But we can also have rematches between any of the fighters, like the fan favorite fighters between Gaethje, Poirier, Chandler, or even look at fun matchups like, you know, down the rankings like Pimlet versus Renato Moicano, which we'll hopefully eventually get as well. But I want to go with another Brazilian, not Renato Moicano, and I think we all know who that's going to be. Charles do Bronx Oliveira, the champion, has a name. Now, who to match him up with is the question, because Charles Oliveira is a draw regardless. He is an extremely viable finisher, obviously one of, if not the best finisher in the UFC statistically. And look, he could fit in any of these matchups that we could make. He would make any of them good. I mean, any of the matchups where we could have rematches. Obviously, we could have Gaethje, Poirier, we could have Islam as well, or we could have the big one that is rumored, which is Dan Hooker. But I'm going to go with the matchup that has rarely actually been talked about, but will be a certified banger of a fight, 100%. And that is Charles Oliveira versus Rafael Fiziev. Now, these guys were only rumored to fight at UFC 283. That's the only source I could really find in terms of this matchup actually being done. But Charles turned the matchup down because he wanted a break after losing to Islam Makhachev at UFC 280, which is completely fair because his title reign before that was insane. You know, going to wars with literally Poirier, Gaethje, Chandler as well. He just did a fantastic, memorable job as a champion, so it was fair that the matchup didn't get made. But in terms of feasibility, if it's not Dan Hooker, why not just make this matchup next? You know, Charles is coming off a loss to Arman Sarukian and, you know, obviously fought Gaethje in a pretty high damage fight, and Fiziev did the exact same thing. He went to a 3-round war with Gaethje and then got injured against Gamrot, which he didn't technically lose. And look, Gamrot could possibly be next for Charles, which would make a lot of sense. It would be a good ground game, but in terms of the striking, I'm just definitely preferring the exchange between Fiziev and Charles over Charles and Gamrot. And a hot take, I actually prefer this over the Hooker fight as well, because mainly down to Fiziev's takedown defense. I think that is the big question here. And look, the guy, he has a very low center of gravity and he has very good footwork to position himself where he can sprawl effectively and not let himself get taken down, which could force Charles to stay on the feet with Fiziev. But that's where this fight, this matchup gets so extremely interesting, and it takes it for me in this division, because Charles's Muay Thai has improved so much throughout his career. I mean, he took Chandler out with a beautiful left hook. He hit Gaethje harder than he's ever been hit before, bar Holloway sleeping him, of course. So it really gives questions in this fight, and questions make the best fights for the fans building up, because who's going to win this in what area? And this is a fight that's really going to show that. I mean, will Charles's power be the difference for Fiziev, and can he take him down if needed, or will Fiziev's Muay Thai outclass Charles's, and what will his submission defense look like if Charles can get him to the ground? There's just heaps of questions there, and it makes the fight more interesting. So we really need this matchup made. And look, both of these guys, they land at a very high output. They have KO power as well, and have their timelines pretty much match up perfectly as well, because with Fiziev busting his ACL in September last year, that means he needed a year off, and we are at that point now. And Charles fought at UFC 300 in April, so realistically, if they wanted to, this could be made for around November or December. Put it on like a 309, 310, anything like that, possibly start of next year. But I do feel like Dana does have other plans for Charles. And look, it'll most likely be Dan Hooker, which I'm not going to complain about. It's a great fight. But regardless whether it's next or not, this is a fight that we have to see. Now, moving on to welterweight. Now, welterweight, as we know, is notorious for being absolutely ransacked by wrestlers. So I really wanted to pick out a matchup that would stand out from those matchups. Obviously, there's a lot of wrestling matchups that we could make that would look fantastic. You know, Bilal versus Usman, even Shavkat to an extent with any of those guys as well. We got Brady in there too. Gilbert Burns is still viable, but we've seen a lot of them. And I really want the matchup that is going to completely contrast from that, and it is going to be a complete striker's delight. If you haven't already guessed, we need Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Michael Venom Page. I mean, is there any other striking matchup that you can make that could outclass these? Absolutely not. I know we may not see this fight due to, their history of being friends and being training partners, but these guys are some of the most unique yet world-class strikers we have ever seen in MMA ever, and they both aren't getting any younger as well. So it does make sense in terms of rankings, without a doubt, because Wonderboy is 9th at the time of this video and MVP is 13th, and he's coming off a narrow loss against Ian Gary, who is ranked number 7. So it's definitely fair that we could see this matchup, and obviously it depends on Wonderboy and how he goes against Joaquin Buckley coming up. But regardless, win or lose, please just make this matchup. Every fan would want to see this. And look, I don't see either of these guys taking this fight to the ground, similar to the Wonderboy versus Kevin Holland fight, which was without a doubt one of my favorite fights that I've ever seen. But I honestly think that this will need to be a 5-round fight, because I can easily see them needing more than 1 round to get those proper reads on each other to really get their shots off, because they just are pretty much the opposite of being basic strikers. And look, a 3-round fight I feel like is going to be a little bit too slow, but if these guys obviously find their range and start popping off, which a 5-round fight gives them enough time to do without a doubt. Look, between Wonderboy having the Kempo karate style striking, with great distance management, his movement is fantastic, and his versatile kicking game, along with MVP having that pinpoint accuracy, the lightning fast hand speed, and unorthodox striking there as well, it'll be one of the best striking showcases in UFC history. So I'm very much hoping we get this fight, especially before either one of them retire. Now, moving on to middleweight. This division is definitely the most open it has ever been, with Dricus cementing himself as the champion, beating Israel Adesanya at UFC 305, who ran circles around the division for 5 odd years. So Izzy was single-handedly just making the division stale because he was just way too good for pretty much anyone else there. And look, a whole new generation of fighters have moved into the rankings now, along with Izzy getting dropped down, which just opens it up completely. I mean, we've got Caio Borralho, who just won last weekend, Brandon Allen, Anthony Hernandez, we've got Nasruddin Imavov, all there just floating very high up to that title range. But the guy that I want to look at, who honestly I think is scarier than all of them, is Michel Pereira. Even though, look, he hasn't fought the toughest of opposition, he's jumped into the middleweight rankings by going on a 3-fight finish streak with all the finishes together, totaling 3 minutes of fight time. This is with him finishing Petrosky, Mikel Olachechek, and Ihor Peteria brutally, and he is extremely well-rounded. I mean, he's extremely strong, he's very explosive, and has a very chaotic style, especially with that capoeira base that he does have. You know, very high chance he's going to backflip on your face. And look, being as chaotic as that, there is no better person to have him match up against than Dricus Du Plessis. Just absolute chaos of a matchup, and I am here for it. Look, the numbers speak for themselves. Together, they have a combined 40 finishes over their combined 53 wins. They're both extremely durable as well, and very well rounded between the two of them. You know, Dricus having no lack of cardio at this point, while simultaneously having an impossible to define fight style that somehow works even against the best of kickboxers like Israel Adesanya. So absolutely no counting him out, but that unorthodox style that he does have just leans into that chaos that we want to see. So let's mix that insane style with Pereira's explosive capoeira style, and we are guaranteed a show. And not only a show, I am very, very confident someone is getting brutally finished. And moving on to light heavyweight, look, we have Alex Pereira at the top of that division, who is now pretty much the face of the UFC. He has solidified himself as the light heavyweight champion because he has just brutally chinned both Jamal Hill and Yuri Prochazka twice. So it is time to settle who is number 2 in that division. Now, for argument's sake, there is Ankalaev there, but both Yuri and Jamal have been champions of the division, and they were supposed to fight each other previously before Yuri got injured, absolutely wrecking his shoulder in training, and then again after Jamal getting injured with his Achilles. So it's a long time coming for this matchup to be made. So if Yuri doesn't move down to middleweight, I think this is the one to make. Yuri has the wild, unorthodox style that can catch anyone off guard, unless you're Alex Pereira, of course. And he's got the KO power there 100%. I mean, look at what happened to Dom Reyes and Volkan Oezdemir as well. And look, the durability is there too. He's very durable, unless someone has freakish KO power. But I will say on the other side, Jamal, he might not be as experienced as Yuri Prochazka, but he's definitely got the power there, and that's what questions this fight and makes it interesting. And with a 5-round fight, we are pretty much guaranteed a finish here. This matchup just needs to be made. It's just been a long time coming. They're both finishing machines, and we really needed to cement who is number 2. And look, if Jamal wins, he gets right back into title contention, where he is craving to fight Alex Pereira again, and Yuri would most likely move down. And then look, if that's a fresh start for Yuri, but then if Yuri wins, he gets momentum back, and Jamal Hill just becomes even more salty, which we just like to see. Now, moving on to the heavyweight division, which I have said in multiple other videos, it's not the most exciting division. That is down to, you know, obviously Aspinall most likely not getting the John Jones fight, which I do talk more about in my heavyweight division as a mess video, which I will leave in the description below. And look, that's the fight that literally everyone wants, except John Jones and Dana White.
John Jones is the pound for pound best fighter in the world and the greatest fighter ever. Period. End of story.
We need to see someone that can somehow challenge Tom Aspinall. And the one guy that I see doing that is Ciryl Gane. Tom Aspinall versus Ciryl Gane, and we need this for multiple reasons. Look, with Aspinall finishing both Blades and Pavlovich, Gane is Aspinall's biggest threat to his legacy. And this is mainly because Ciryl Gane is one of the only fighters who can even come close to matching Aspinall's speed. And look, obviously in the striking, but especially with his movement, and that is what has been causing so many heavyweights instant issues against Aspinall, because he's way too fast. Way too fast. And I think he's way too fast for Jon Jones as well, and I think you'd chin him. So we need a guy that can challenge him in that sense. And look, if Aspinall successfully gets over Ciryl Gane as a hurdle, I don't see anyone in those rankings who can dethrone him, honestly. No chance. And if Ciryl Gane can get this done, he gets all the respect back from the fans, saying that he doesn't take it seriously. He's like a FIFA merchant. And look, to emphasize it, if he prevents Aspinall from submitting him, that's a huge confidence boost in contrast to the performance that he had against Jon Jones. And look, Ciryl is also the guy that could potentially draw Aspinall into the later rounds to really test his skills deep into the fight, to see if his gas tank does manage, which I think it will, to see if it manages, and to see if he can take him into those deep waters, and see if he can take Aspinall somewhere where not only Aspinall really hasn't been before, but where we all have never seen him before. So we never know, there could be a chance that Ciryl Gane could do something in those later rounds. And look, aside from that, we've got Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. Both of those guys are most likely going to retire. We take both of those guys out of the equation. Who does Tom Aspinall fight? Who's the most exciting fighter to have him fight against? Ciryl Gane. We definitely need this fight. And once those two retire, make this fight for the undisputed heavyweight title. Now, moving on to the women's division, kicking off with the strawweight division. Look, the obvious answer here that people want to see, and that we'll most likely get to see next, is Zhang Weili versus Tatiana Suarez, which, don't get me wrong, is a great fight. I really do want to see that, especially to see how Tatiana Suarez tests someone like Weili in that wrestling department, who has been a very, very strong champion. But looking deeper into the division, I want to go with a fight that's a bit more underrated and that really sticks out for me, and that the strawweight division can really, gain from. And I think that is Yan Xiaonan versus Amanda Lemos. And that's because if there is any division that needs fighters that can actually finish fights to boost its popularity, aside from Bantamweight women's, it's strawweight. And the way to do that is putting these two against each other. Plain and simple, because you look at Amanda Lemos, who took out Montserrat Ruiz brutally, as well as Marina Rodriguez, which is more impressive because Marina Rodriguez is very good at circling, very good with her distance, took her out. And then Yan Xiaonan put Weili in a fair bit of danger in that UFC 300 fight early, knocked her down, and then destroyed Jessica Andrade before that. So mixing these two together, with Yan Xiaonan's kickboxing and Amanda Lemos' strike speed and power, is just a recipe for an exciting finish on the feet, which this division really needs. And if they're going to make it, I'm 100% here for it. The UFC need to make this fight next to get more respect on the women's division so we can see those finishes. Now, moving on to women's flyweight division, this division is definitely the best division in women's MMA easily, because they have a very stacked top 10. They have a good mix of styles in there, and they have great young talent coming through the division, with two in particular that are already at the top of the division that I want to see for multiple reasons. And that's Macy Barber versus Erin Blanchfield. Now, both of them are very young in the division comparatively. Erin's 25 and then Macy's 26 years old, but they are ranked 3rd and 4th in the division and are both one win away from a title shot already, which is extremely impressive, and it's really emphasizing the longevity of both of them. And aside from losing to Manon Fior, who I think is borderline guaranteed to not only get a title fight, I think she's guaranteed to be a champion. She's 7-0 in the UFC so far. She is an absolute beast. And look, Erin Blanchfield only losing to Manon Fiorot, that's nothing to worry about in terms of being Erin. You know, she did lose, she lost decisively, but she's beaten everyone else in there, and she's so young. I mean, she's the most dangerous submission artist in that division, without a doubt. And then on the other side, we have Macy, who is one of the best fighters in the clinch in not only that division, in women's MMA. And it's really good because she makes it scrappy on the feet as well, especially with the clinch. She has a fantastic dirty boxing game. And I honestly don't really remember many fights with her where there isn't really like blood pretty much everywhere. So Macy Barber's a fan favorite. Erin Blanchfield is extremely impressive for her age. And look, Macy Barber, 6-fight win streak, with her last loss being to Alexa Grasso, who is the current champion. So it is blatantly evident that they are both meant to be at the top of that division. And Erin is obviously fighting Rose Namajunas next, which is going to be a very tough fight for her and for Rose. But even if that wasn't actually already solidified, I would have preferred this fight anyway, because Macy has that forward pressure engagement to make this a very fun, scrappy fight, more so than I believe Rose can, because Rose, you know, manages more so at range and is very good in terms of her transitions to the ground. And look, it'll not only be great because of the clash of styles, you know, seeing if Macy Barber can survive on the ground against Erin, and then we also see if Erin can deal with the pressure and strength on the feet from Macy, but also this fight will really impact the trajectory of their careers. Seeing if one of them dominates the other, they're going to have to be hyper focused and fixated on beating them down the line, as they will both definitely still be at the top and possibly, you know, champions moving into the next 4 to 5 years. I just don't see this fight really disappointing when it comes to their clash of styles, and especially if this is a 5-round fight. It's just Erin's not great on the feet, and then she is so good on the ground that it's either she's going to get pieced on the feet or Erin's just going to absolutely swamp her on the ground. So it's just going to be very fascinating to see how they both, you know, adapt to each other's styles of game. So I definitely see this being a very interesting fight with a lot of questions, and I can definitely see a finish in this fight, which, just like Strawweight, it's just going to be fantastic for the division to gain more fans. Now, last and least, we're moving on to the Bantamweight women's division. Look, obviously, this is the weakest division in the UFC. They had to bolster it by literally merging 2 divisions. There just aren't a lot of exciting matchups in there regardless, but there is a clear and obvious one to make, which people will actually enjoy, and that's just obviously Juliana Pena versus Kayla Harrison. This will make for a very decent, you know, scrappy clinch game kind of fight. Very good ground transitions as well, because, you know, you got Kayla, who has the strength, she's got the judo advantage there, and then you got Juliana, who is very good with her ground transitions and is extremely aggressive. So they'll make this a very fast-paced fight. And on top of that, which, similar to Flyweight, which is extremely crucial, is that there is a lot of drama and animosity between these two. Very similar to, you know, obviously Manel Cap and Kai Kara France. These guys hate each other. I mean, Pena has accused Kayla of cheating and then degrading her career overall.
Holly?
No, Kayla.
Kayla. Yeah.
I mean, just the fact that she made 135 blew my mind.
Right.
I was worried about that.
I was worried about that too.
How do you think she looked on the scale?
Great. Strong. Yeah. Stay off the needle, bro.
What do you think she's on?
Maybe not now.
Right.
I mean, definitely in the past, absolutely. There's no question.
No question.
No question.
And then Kayla Harrison has just said that she wants to put her elbow through Pena's skull for shit talking.
If we're talking about Kayla the psychopath, like, of course I would rather put a elbow through Juliana's skull than Raquel's. Like, Juliana's face is annoying. Of course I would pick that face. Like, of course.
So it's very safe to say that this will have a good build-up, and it's just, you know, a matter of time before we actually are going to get this fight. Juliana Pena, obviously, you know, she gets through Pennington and becomes a champion. It's just going to emphasize the point even more. And look, it's ultimately the fight that the division desperately needs to get more fan attention. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and hopefully moving forward now with everything settling down, I'll be able to release more consistent content for you guys, which I love doing, and all the support is fantastic. Please like, comment, subscribe. It still really goes a long way for this channel being so small at the moment, which I'm really hoping to obviously build up and branch out and talk to more of you guys. And with that, if you haven't seen already, check out my video on Tony Ferguson versus Paul Felder back in 2018 as my mythical matchups video, with Tony Ferguson being the second ranked fighter in the division at the time and Paul Felder being on a 3-fight finish streak, to see who would have won that matchup back then. Definitely a good video. Please go check it out, and I will catch you in the next one.